This is the largest organism that has ever lived on Earth. It's about 2,400 times larger than the blue whale, which is already pretty freaking big. If you want to hear more about Earth's gigantic monsters, then prepare for the age of giant fungi. So it turns out giant mushrooms aren't just the stuff of fantasy novels and 90s cartoons. They're an important part of our planet's history. But to understand how these behemoths came to be, we need to go back to the very first fungi. Fungi are a kingdom of life unto their own, separate from plants or animals, and they've been around for a long time. The earliest known fungal fossils date to about 760 million years ago. And even back then, there were differences between different types of fungi. Some were more like yeasts, while others grew into multicellular filaments that could spread over large distances. These early fungi didn't use photosynthesis to make their food like plants do. Instead, they absorbed nutrients by secreting acids that broke down surrounding organic matter. Now, scientists don't know exactly what triggered the evolution of these ancient fungi, but one likely reason was a dramatic increase in atmospheric oxygen levels. You see, when life first appeared on Earth, it was almost entirely microscopic and therefore didn't require much oxygen. But as larger organisms evolved, like algae and then land plants, they started using up more and more of this precious resource. By the time animals showed up on the scene some 600 million years later, oxygen had become relatively abundant and fungi were ready to take advantage of it. These early fungi may have looked similar to the molds and mushrooms we know today, but they were actually closer to modern yeasts. You can still find them if you look hard enough, like in this fossil from 300 million years ago. So far, no one has found fossils of mushrooms older than this, leaving a gap in the fossil record that scientists hope to fill soon. But whatever caused these early fungi to grow larger, the result was huge. During the Devonian period, which lasted from about 419 to 359 million years ago, fungi began to thrive. One example is the genus Prototaxites. Now, paleontologists used to think that Prototaxites were the trunks of ancient trees, but more recent evidence suggests that they were actually giant mushrooms. If so, they would have grown to truly gargantuan heights, reaching up to 10 meters tall and with caps spanning 11 meters across. That's taller than a giraffe and wider than a London bus. These fungi got so big because they had access to a lot of nutrients and most likely reproduced via spores that spread through the wind. This is why all parts of the world where these fossils have been found also contain lots of fossils of early vascular plants, because those plants provided a bunch of nutrient-rich material for the fungi to feast on. However, it looks like the rise of these giant mushrooms may have played a role in the evolution of plants themselves. See, plants have a few ways of getting water from the soil. Some absorb it through their roots, like most land plants. Others, like mosses, acquire most of their moisture directly through their leaves. But the earliest land plants relied on a process called hydroids, which are basically specialized cells that transport water throughout the plant. And hydroids are only found in plants related to mosses, not vascular plants like trees or shrubs. This suggests that the evolution of hydroids happened early in land plant evolution, but not in the very first plants. Otherwise, all land plants would have hydroids. So scientists hypothesized that the development of these water-conducting cells might have been a response to environmental stress. Something like, we don't know, giant prehistoric mushrooms. Of course, it's not like these mushrooms killed off every early plant that could get enough water and only the hydroid havers survived. More likely, the fungi and plants co-evolved. As the fungi grew larger, the plants became better at conducting water, and the fungi kept growing larger until eventually, bam, modern plants and fungi. But giant mushrooms weren't just sprouting up during the Devonian. Another mushroom genus called Astroporus reached its peak during the Carboniferous period, which lasted from about 359 to 299 million years ago. While the spores of most fungi are too small to see with the naked eye, Astroporus was not most fungi. These mushrooms produced spores over 0.5 millimeter across, which you may be able to make out with the unaided eye. And unlike many other ancient fungi, Astroporus didn't break down dead organic matter. Instead, they grew on living plants, acting kind of like modern parasitic fungi. So their growth likely depended on the health of the nearby plant life. And the forests of the Carboniferous were some of the largest and most widespread that Earth has ever seen. Today, these forests are mostly gone, having been converted to coal by human industry. But back then, they spanned the entire planet, containing the ancestors of today's ferns, conifers, flowering plants, and more. And all this plant life would have provided plenty of nutrients for these giant mushrooms to consume. In fact, given that these fungi grew on the forest floor, they probably benefited from a symbiotic relationship with the plants. See, fungi can help plants obtain nutrients and water, while the plants provide the fungi with sugars made through photosynthesis. It's a win-win. So, thanks to their underground networks of nutrient-absorbing filaments, the Astroporus were able to grow massive. One species, Astroporus magnus, may have weighed over 1 ton. That's heavier than a walrus or an African bush elephant. And the largest specimen ever discovered was 1.7 meters wide and 2.5 meters high. Other species were humongous too. For example, one specimen of Astroporus intermedius was 1.2 meters wide and 1.8 meters high. That's nearly as tall as the average basketball player. For a while, scientists thought that the giant mushrooms of the Carboniferous were a thing of the past, having gone extinct alongside the giant forests that may have helped them grow. However, the discovery of fossilized spores in 2016 revealed that this isn't the case. These fungi may be ancient, but they are not extinct. To this day, Astroporus species are among the largest fungi on Earth. It's unclear whether any living fungus could reach the size of these prehistoric mushrooms. But it's possible that something out there comes close. Take Armillaria ostoi, aka the honey mushroom. This species forms vast underground networks that spread over hundreds of acres. It may also grow to extraordinary sizes. The largest known honey mushroom weighed 400 pounds and had a cap 4 feet across. Just imagine stumbling upon that while foraging for morels. Or consider the genus Melanchones. These fungi form massive fruiting bodies, which are the parts you typically associate with mushrooms. One species, Melanchones mindo, produces fruiting bodies that are 2 meters tall and 4 meters wide. That's as tall as a person and wider than a full queen-size bed. While these giants may not match the colossal proportions of their ancient relatives, they're still pretty darn big. And the truth is, it's hard to say how large a fungus could get. It all depends on what factors limit their growth. Is it the amount of water, nutrients, oxygen, or something else? Unfortunately, death by fungal infection is usually pretty quick. So figuring out how big a fungus could get, in theory, isn't easy. Plus, most fungi spend most of their lives underground, hidden from view. So we may never know how large they become before they die. In other words, the largest organisms that have ever lived may have also been the least observable. But that doesn't mean we can't appreciate them. After all, without fungi, we wouldn't have all the pizza toppings we love. Speaking of things that make life on Earth possible, the soils we farm our food on are full of helpful microorganisms.